Mr. Putin, let's start with what dictator Putin said. I know from watching your answers that you don't like to talk about what is happening in Russia and what is connected to the Russian dictator. However, in the context of Kamala Harris, during his speech at the Congress, the Russian ruler suddenly reminded us that the current president, Joe Biden, when he dropped out of the presidential race, asked all his voters to support Harris's candidacy. So Putin assures us that he will also support the Democratic candidate, but will respect the choice of the American people. Putin said President Biden, who withdrew from the race, recommended supporting Ms. Harris, and we will do the same. What should be made of Putin's complimentary remarks about Kamala Harris, a Democratic presidential candidate? Well, because as it's said here with respect, and also, well, it's not about Putin at all, and it's not about complimentary. What do you think? First, it's a double game with a double bottom, which is a typical Russian service. Trump is given a message, look, and Putin supports Kamala. This morning, you saw the news from the United States, who end the day later because of these time zones. Today, we have information that the Treasury Department has opened a case on Russian interference in the U.S. elections. Simonyan, Russia says. Today, a bunch of unknown Russian agents, all of them interfered in the election, tried to recruit high-ranking officials, influence the process itself, and the media flow went in the direction of Trump being invaded. Helped. Putin comes out and changes the media flow. He says, I'm for Kamala, Kamala, and everyone is like, stop, what happens then? I mean, the Russians interfered, the intelligence community and Russia Today are for Trump, and Putin is for Kamala. So it's not clear two candidates each with something to answer to the other. I mean, Putin personally is already, well, his business in Russia and the United States is so bad. That he is personally ready to interfere in the elections. Now he is working as a kind of a little agitator, a toxic Russian flag, but he does not directly support anyone because he is a toxic creature. On the contrary, he tries to hug other people to lower their ratings. And it is also very important to understand that the diplomats are French. There are diplomats, I don't know, German, Polish, Lithuanian intelligence agencies that are very active in Russia, reporting the following version, or rather the following story that they have because of the data they have received, that Russia does not know what to do with Kamala Harris. Russia is not sure which people and how to use to get to her, because they have nicknamed her. They didn't expect Kamala Harris to be a serious candidate, especially as she's now polling ahead of Trump. Her unexpected rise is causing confusion. Putin's public support for Harris seems like a strategy to influence the narrative and support Trump indirectly. If Harris wins, Putin can claim he supported her and then use his usual tactics to manipulate the situation. He says, I mean, it was a double bottom line. But no, I sincerely supported you. Let's be friends. Let's do something. So now we see that Putin is trying to hit several targets with one stone, and now he's doing it, but he's not doing it from a good life. If Putin had some people who could do it, he would have started to bother them a long time ago. But look how poor it has become in the Kremlin palace. You have to do it yourself. Well, cheap propaganda performed by a bad actor. Mr. Kovalev, what's interesting is that these headlines are about Putin suddenly praising Harris and criticizing Trump. But I looked at what exactly Putin said. I'll quote again. The dictator also noted that Harris is not laughing now, so she is doing well, and Putin added, if Harris is doing well, He hopes for sanctions against Russia if he wins. He said that Trump has already imposed more sanctions and restrictions on Russia than any president before him. If Harris performs well, she might avoid sanctions or lead to their reduction, unlike Trump, who faced criticism for imposing many sanctions. Putin has historically preferred Trump due to his pro-Russian stance, but these statements suggest he hopes for better relations. That Putin would be happy if Trump became president of the United States. Here we see statements like this. No, in fact, this is what I was talking about. It's a bearish favor and an attempt to cut off the support for Russia that has been exposed, and they are now trying to just play their own game. Russians always do this. So let's be honest. Have sanctions critically destroyed Russia? Neither Trump, nor Biden, nor Obama has an enemy, a super big and scary enemy against whom there will be real sanctions, whether it is China. Russia is still a proxy between the great powers, a regional power, a dumb, disproportionate, unnecessary size that will be reduced. But they don't want to impose super sanctions, risk nuclear threats, and they won't, because they don't see Russia as a real big enemy. For them, Russia is a weak regional enemy that they are confident they can defeat if necessary. The problem is that they don't help us 100% to win, but they are okay with these things. Putin was not afraid of Trump's sanctions. He said it to send a message to Trump, not to Harris. And here's what Biden's campaign and Harris's campaign are saying now. We're able to get cases opened for election interference. Putin tries to interrupt with these statements. Mr. Kovalchuk, let's discuss Harris and Trump separately. Harris's lead over Trump has created an unforeseen issue for Ukraine, as her stable advantage has overly reassured Ukraine's European partners. With Kamala Harris leading and no fear of Trump becoming president, Europeans have slowed the transfer of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, according to Politico. In June, the G7 group of governments agreed to provide Ukraine with a $50 billion loan, which will be covered by Russia's frozen assets. However, the process of technical coordination of this loan between the EU and the United States is still ongoing. In your opinion, is this due to the differences between the allies in their approaches to this loan? And does Harris's advantage over Trump have an impact on this situation? As Politico wrote, that Harris's advantage really provoked such a problem for Ukraine. Well, let's just say that it's all about risk management, and they are very good at it. They understand these things very well. But in this case, to be honest, it's super unprofitable for us. Things were going so well that they decided to cut us $50 billion, an unpleasant story. I think Trump sees this somewhere and realizes that they were trying to use him as a toxic torpedo and scare him. That even some of the American leadership in the G7 and NATO is being used to distribute money and manage Ramstein. We see that we can't do it ourselves, and if Trump wins, we are sure that he won't do it. But now they've realized that Kamala is going to win anyway, so they don't have to do it. And they're like, let's keep this leadership for ourselves. I think this was Biden's plan to make Trump even more toxic. But from what we see at this second, their elections, their games, are cool. One of the American candidates will definitely win. But if we don't get the money, we will lose the lives of Ukrainian citizens. That's why I think Zelenskyy is going to Ramstein, going to Washington to meet with Biden, Trump, Harris, and say, friends, put us outside the brackets of your bipartisan confrontation. We are your friends, not enemies. This money, even if Harris or Trump wins, doesn't matter. It's not your money. You don't have to give it away, and you don't have to earn it. Therefore, let's give Ukraine the money, save lives, regain territories, and everyone will benefit. Everyone will win. Because if we don't give this money now, then there will be a transition period, then the inauguration, and a bunch of other things. We will lose time and people. This should not be allowed. Politico is a very insider newspaper, and I've been to their editorial office several times. These are actually very journalists who have penetrated all the processes. They really know a lot, and these are markers and trends that we need to pay attention to and react to. I think that for us, this is exactly the kind of story where we need to not miss this information and still go and do it. The money should be in Ukraine. It's just that besides the money, theoretically, they could find it somewhere in the world, although it's a big amount in reality. I think that 8 months of our war can be paid for with this money, but not a year. But it seems to be enough. It's just an important precedent. The big check has to go. You know, some of our partners in Europe say that there is no precedent, so we won't give it back, and 300 can hang around. Only in Belgium 200 is on the Euroclear. So now we need to set a precedent for ourselves. Just pour money into the budget. MPs are seeking ways to fight corruption, but the cabinet of ministers seems unconcerned, focusing only on raising taxes or cutting social welfare. Securing the $50 billion, equivalent to 1.5 times our pre-war budget, could set a precedent and fill our coffers. We hope President Zelenskyy will soon present the victory plan to President Biden. We believe that perhaps tomorrow the president will be able to attend Ramstein's meeting. So far, this is preliminary information that appears in foreign media. There is no official confirmation yet. Speaking about the victory plan, the president added in an interview with NBC that he believes the victory plan is subjective and does not depend solely on Ukraine. Therefore, he cannot be sure that Kyiv will be able to implement it. But as the president explained, he thought that this plan was correct, and the first part of it was the corresponding operation, part of which you saw in the Kursk region. Zelenskyy explained that Ukraine's victory plan is 4+1, meaning that 4 points are what is necessary, and 1 is after the war. The president of Ukraine said he did not specify what he was talking about, but in your opinion, if you can speculate on this issue, what points could we hypothetically be talking about? Refers to Kursk operation, useful for our purposes. 4+1, what do you think it could be? Well, I think it's better to ask Zelenskyy rather than guessing on coffee grounds what it could be. You can't get into his head, and the people who can are obviously not present in the studio right now. I think that, from what I see, you can add and take away. Kursk is what is included in this item in the menu. This aligns with Trump's love for deals. The idea is to propose a deal where Trump, as the only American president to return Russian territory, could negotiate, morally pay for Alaska by giving Kursk back to Russia while making a deal with Ukraine to return Kursk. This frames the conflict as a trade-off between capturing Kyiv and Kursk. And Trump can bring it back, like it's his style. The second thing that can be removed from the negotiation track, which is not a bargaining chip, but added to the track of what is already in Biden's hands, is to come and say, look, Mr. Biden, you are finishing your presidential term. This is a great term. You have been in politics for 50 years. Every politician has to pack a suitcase called a political legacy. No one wants to do this because it's the final story. You have to put your pantry in order. But you need to show the world how you will be remembered, what your legacy is. This is how politics works. We say, Mr. Biden, there is no great victory on the Ukrainian track, no fat historical point. The world does not perceive Ukraine, China, and Russia as a victory. We need a victory. Yes, we can see that you don't have time to solve this on the battlefield. Can you give Ukraine an invitation to join NATO? By giving Ukraine an invitation to join NATO, you are dragging Ukraine into the Western world and saying, friends, your place is here. Under this umbrella, it can be active in war or inactive. Article 5, it doesn't matter, but your invitation is here.
І коли завершите, знайте, що все. Ваше паркомісце в НАТО є. Це ваша територія, робіть, що хочете. Все, тоді до переговорів додається...
And when you're done, you know that that's it. You have your parking space in NATO, it's your territory, do what you want. Then the negotiations include a clause that the application is in our hands, and Biden can do it in his hands, no exaggeration. And then NATO drops out of the negotiations because some European partners want to say, okay, Russians, freeze, at best, leave their territory. For this, we are not taking them to NATO. Strategically, it is a defeat for us. When we already have an invitation, we say it's not up for negotiation. It's in our hands. We didn't celebrate Biden's 75th birthday or make a fuss like in Vilnius. We didn't send any messages or posts. So we expect something in return. Show us a bonus. As mentioned, Ukraine will not negotiate without seeing its place in NATO and the West. The Telegraph, a more populist and yellow British newspaper, also said Ukraine will be in NATO. That's when the war will be over. That is, it is already clear that in the second half of 2024, the positions of the candidates began to change. And now we will see that it can still gain new perceptions of new realities. Ukraine is in Kursk, so why can't Ukraine be in NATO? So we can enter the territory protected by nuclear weapons, but we cannot enter the territory of partners who have opened their arms to us? This means that our partners are not completely sincere. The Lithuanian foreign minister said it very clearly and concisely. Today, Russian planes are better protected in the airspace than Ukrainian skies. This should not be the case. This is the formula for how the world treats Russia today. Russia is protected, but Ukraine is not. We can enter Russian territory, but not NATO territory. These formulas need to be changed. They are wrong, anti-Ukrainian, and anti-human.
Ось ці формули треба міняти. Це невірні формули. Це антиукраїнські, антилюдяні формули. Їх треба міняти.
Пане Миколо, ну от як і президент зауважив щодо цього плану перемоги, що ми...
As the president noted, the plan of victory does not depend on the Russians, and it is the choice of our partners, whether they agree that Ukraine should win or are ready only to contain Putin. The president wants to find an answer for our people, and it is very important. That is why we want to hear this answer. Do our partners want Ukraine to win, or do they only want to contain Putin and balance him, as is happening now? Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for your professional opinions. As always, it was interesting to talk to you. I would like to remind you that Mykola Davydiuk, a political scientist, was on the line.